The sound of tearing wrapping paper echoed through the room as I stood frozen in the doorway, snowflakes melting on my shoulders. My son Thomas and his wife Melissa didn't notice me at first, too engrossed in the contents of my grandmother's antique chest, the one I'd inherited decades ago, filled with family heirlooms I'd been saving for my own funeral, the one I kept locked in my bedroom closet at home. "This bracelet alone must be worth $5,000, Melissa whispered, holding up my mother's diamond tennis bracelet to the twinkling Christmas lights. "And look at these pearls." That's when my daughter-in-law's eyes met mine, widening in horror. The champagne flute slipped from her manicured fingers, shattering against the hardwood floor of their Oakwood Manor home. My son turned, his face draining of color as he stammered, "Mom, what are you weren't supposed to be here." I should have listened when Thomas called 3 days earlier, his voice unusually strained as he told me Christmas would be too hectic this year, suggesting we celebrate in January instead. For the first time in 38 years, my only child didn't want me at Christmas. I'd raised him alone after his father abandoned us when he was just 4, working 2 jobs to give him everything. Now, at 63, I stood in the elegant foyer of his Connecticut home, witnessing the unimaginable. Around the room, other family members froze in guilty tableau, my sister-in-law Catherine clutching my grandmother's silver candlesticks, my nephew trying to hide what looked like my father's pocket watch. On the coffee table lay papers, legal documents with my name prominently displayed at the top. "Elizabeth, we can explain," Catherine started, but her words died as I stepped forward, my winter boots leaving melting puddles on the imported marble. The Christmas tree loomed in the corner, adorned with ornate decorations I'd never seen before. No sign of the handmade ornaments Thomas and I had crafted together during those lean years in our small apartment. No star I'd saved 3 weeks' salary to buy when he was 10. Instead, the tree was a designer showcase, as impersonal as a department store display. And beneath it, not wrapped presents waiting for Christmas morning, but my possessions, my memories, my legacy, being divided among family members who clearly thought I was, already dead? Or just too feeble-minded to notice? "How did you get into my house?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady despite the earthquake happening inside my chest. Thomas exchanged a glance with his wife before answering, "We were worried about you, Mom. You've been forgetting things." I hadn't been forgetting anything, at least nothing important. Maybe I occasionally misplaced my reading glasses or forgot to return a phone call, but who didn't at my age? I'd been the bookkeeper at Johnson Manufacturing for 27 years before retiring 2 years ago. I still balanced my checkbook to the penny and remembered every birthday without fail. "So you broke into my home and stole my belongings?" The words felt strange in my mouth, impossible to comprehend even as I said them. "It's not stealing," Melissa said, her lawyer's training evident in her careful choice of words. "Thomas has power of attorney." "No, he doesn't. I'd never signed such a document. I would remember something that significant." My son lifted a document from the coffee table. "You signed it last year, Mom, after you had that fall." The fall. I'd slipped on ice bringing in groceries and sprained my wrist. Thomas had brought me paperwork in the hospital. Insurance forms, I thought. I'd signed without reading carefully, trusting my son implicitly. The room began to spin as reality crashed down. While I'd been planning my traditional Christmas dinner and wrapping presents I'd carefully selected for each family member, they'd been planning this. "We just want what's best for you," Catherine said, though she didn't put down my grandmother's candlesticks. "The memory care facility in Bridgeport has an excellent reputation." Memory care facility? They were putting me away, erasing me, taking everything I'd worked for, everything I'd preserved and protected to pass down through generations. The family photos on the mantle didn't include me. My late husband James smiled out from a silver frame, arms around Thomas at his law school graduation. I'd taken that photo. I'd been edited out of my own life. Outside, snow was falling heavily, blanketing the manicured lawns of Oakwood Manor in pristine white. Through the bay window, I could see other homes with warm lights and families gathering. Normal Christmases. Not this nightmare where my son, my only child, my heart, looked at me with a stranger's calculating eyes. "Thomas," I whispered, hoping to find the little boy who once climbed into my bed during thunderstorms, who made me Mother's Day cards with glitter that got everywhere, who called me every Sunday without fail until recently. Why? His expression hardened in a way I'd never seen before. "You're not well, Mom. We're doing this for your own good. I didn't want you to see it happening, that's all. It would have been easier if you just stayed home like I asked. Easier. For whom? Not for me. Standing here watching my family plunder my memories. Not for me. Suddenly understanding why Thomas had been so insistent on having his name added to my accounts, just in case. Not for me, realizing that every "you seem tired lately" and "are you sure you remember correctly" had been laying groundwork for this moment. The grandfather clock in the hallway, my grandfather's clock that should have been in my living room, chimed 6 times. Dinner would be at 7, according to the invitation I'd received weeks ago, before the cancellation call. I'd driven 3 hours through a snowstorm for nothing. No, worse than nothing. For this betrayal that cut deeper than any knife. "I think you should leave," Melissa said quietly, nodding toward the door I'd entered just minutes earlier. "We can discuss arrangements after the holidays." Arrangements. Like I was already dead. In their minds, perhaps I was. My name is Elizabeth Carter, though everyone in Millfield has called me Libby since I was a girl. I've lived in the same 2-story colonial on Maple Street for 40 years, the home where Thomas grew up, where I tended a garden every summer, where I've hosted Sunday dinners and book club meetings and neighborhood Christmas parties. A home filled with memories in every corner, from the height marks penciled on the kitchen door frame to the small cigarette burn on the carpet upstairs, from when James secretly smoked after his doctor told him to quit. He died anyway, heart attack at 52, leaving me a widow far too young. After the scene at Thomas's house, I drove back to Millfield in a daze, barely seeing the road through tears and snow. It was Christmas Eve. Lights twinkled from houses along Main Street as I passed Johnson's Pharmacy, where I'd bought Thomas's cold medicine when he had strep throat in 3rd grade, past Millfield Elementary, where I'd volunteered for every field trip and bake sale, past St. Mary's Church, where I still sang in the choir every Sunday. Normal places that suddenly seemed like artifacts from someone else's life. My neighbor Ruth was shoveling her walkway when I pulled into my driveway. She waved, but I couldn't bring myself to wave back. How could I explain what had happened? That my son believed me incompetent? That my family had been inventorying my possessions behind my back? That documents had been signed without my understanding? The humiliation burned as hot as the betrayal. Inside, my house felt different. They'd been here. Drawers left slightly ajar. Photo albums not quite where I'd placed them. The lock on my bedroom door had been forced. Subtle damage, but visible to my searching eyes. I went straight to the closet where the antique chest should have been. Empty space mocked me. How long had it been gone? When had they taken it? Had I truly not noticed? Or had they done it recently, knowing I'd be arriving at Thomas's today? I sank onto my bed, still wearing my coat, as the events replayed in my mind. The looks on their faces, the documents, the casual way they'd been dividing my treasures, Thomas's cold eyes when he told me to leave. I'd driven home in a snowstorm on Christmas Eve, alone, while my family continued their celebration, using my silver, drinking from my crystal, probably sleeping in bedrooms decorated with my linens. The phone rang, startling me from my stupor. Thomas. I let it go to voicemail. His message was terse. "Mom, we need to talk about what happened. Call me when you get home safely." Not an apology. Not concern for my feelings. Just damage control. My bedroom was the same as always. Floral bedspread James had complained was too feminine. Reading glasses on the nightstand next to a dog-eared mystery novel. Framed photo of Thomas's wedding day. I picked it up, studying my son's face. When had he changed? Or had he always been this person? And I'd just refused to see it. Melissa stood beside him in designer white, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. I'd paid for half that wedding, emptying my modest savings, because that's what mothers do. Now I wondered if they'd been calculating my worth even then. I forced myself to change clothes, to hang up my good coat, to go through the motions of normality. The refrigerator held ingredients for the Christmas dinner I'd planned to cook tomorrow at Thomas's house. A ham, sweet potatoes, ingredients for my famous apple pie. Food no one would eat now. I closed the door without taking anything out. My answering machine blinked with messages. I hit play. Catherine's voice filled the room. "Elizabeth, call as soon as you get this. We're worried about you driving in this weather." My sister-in-law, concerned about my safety while holding my grandmother's candlesticks. Another from my nephew. "Aunt Libby, please call us back. We just want to talk." The same nephew who'd been pocketing my father's watch. Thomas again. "Mom, "You're overreacting. Please be reasonable." Reasonable. I'd been reasonable all my life. Reasonable when James worked late nights with his secretary. Reasonable when money was tight and I made do without. Reasonable when Thomas chose a college across the country, leaving me alone in this too-big house. Reasonable when he married Melissa, who called me Elizabeth instead of Mom, and redecorated my guest room because the decor was dated. Always accommodating, never demanding, making excuses for everyone else's behavior. The clock on the mantle, a wedding gift from my parents, showed nearly midnight when I finally fell asleep on the sofa. Christmas Eve turning to Christmas Day as snow continued to fall outside. No stockings hung on my fireplace this year. No presents waited under a tree. I hadn't bothered putting one up, expecting to celebrate at Thomas's house. Morning light filtered through the curtains, waking me with a stiff neck and the momentary confusion of someone who slept in the wrong place. Then, yesterday's events crashed back, and I curled tighter under the throw blanket, unwilling to face the day. Christmas morning, always Thomas's favorite as a child, waking me at dawn to open presents, eyes wide with wonder at Santa's generosity even in lean years when gifts were mostly homemade or practical necessities disguised as treats. The phone rang again. I didn't answer. Another message from Thomas, his tone more frustrated now. "Mom, you're being childish. We need to discuss this like adults." Childish. The word stung. I was 63 years old, had raised a child alone, managed a household, worked full-time, cared for James through his final illness, and volunteered countless hours in my community. Yet one unplanned appearance at a family gathering I'd been uninvited from, and suddenly, I was the unreasonable one. In the kitchen, I mechanically made coffee, staring at the refrigerator magnets holding Thomas's law school graduation announcement, a photo of him and Melissa in Bermuda, a save-the-date for Catherine's daughter's wedding next spring, family events that now seemed like obligations rather than celebrations. Would they even want me there? This inconvenient mother who refused to go quietly into a memory care facility while they divided her possessions. Outside, children's voices carried on the crisp air, new bikes being tested, excited shouts about Santa's gifts, normal Christmas morning sounds that highlighted my isolation. I'd always been involved in community events, helping with the church pageant, volunteering at the shelter's holiday meal, singing carols at the nursing home. This year, I'd declined all invitations, planning to spend the holiday with family, with Thomas. My cell phone showed 3 missed calls from Ruth next door, probably wondering why my car was home when I was supposed to be at my son's. I needed to think, to understand what had happened and what it meant for my future. The power of attorney document troubled me most. If Thomas truly had legal authority over my affairs, what was to stop him from emptying my accounts, selling my house, committing me to that facility in Bridgeport? I'd worked too hard, sacrificed too much, to have everything taken from me because of some paperwork I'd signed without reading carefully. The Christmas ham sat untouched in my refrigerator as I spent the day in silent contemplation, ignoring more calls, trying to piece together when the signs had started. Thomas suggesting I was getting confused when I disagreed with him about a movie plot. Melissa offering to help organize my financial documents. Catherine asking detailed questions about family heirlooms and their histories, which I'd naively interpreted as interest in preserving family stories. All of it leading to yesterday, to the moment I became an inconvenience rather than a mother. The week after Christmas passed in a fog. I went through motions, retrieving mail, feeding myself, occasionally answering Ruth's concerned knocks with assurances that I was fine, just fighting a cold and wanting privacy. In reality, I was trying to process the depth of betrayal while figuring out my next steps. I needed to understand exactly what I was facing legally before confronting Thomas again. On December 30th, I finally worked up the courage to check my financial accounts online, something Thomas had set up for me for convenience, though I preferred paper statements. The screen showed transfers I hadn't authorized, $5,000 from my savings to an account I didn't recognize on December 15th, another $3,000 on the 22nd, 2 days before Christmas Eve. My retirement account showed recent activity too, not withdrawals, but changes to beneficiary information. My stomach clenched as I realized how methodical their plan had been. New Year's Eve arrived with a certified letter from Bradford, Miller & Associates, Melissa's law firm. Inside was formal notification that Thomas Carter, acting as power of attorney for Elizabeth Carter, had initiated proceedings to evaluate my capacity for independent living. An appointment with a neurological specialist was scheduled for January 10th. They were moving quickly, using holiday timing when services would be limited and offices closed to prevent me from fighting back. The betrayal ran deeper than I'd initially realized. This wasn't an impulsive decision made at Christmas. This was calculated, planned while Thomas was still calling weekly, still accepting the birthday gift I'd mailed in November, still assuring me he was looking forward to our family Christmas. All lies designed to keep me complacent while they dismantled my life. I called the bank on January 2nd, the first business day of the new year, only to discover Thomas was now listed as a joint account holder on all my accounts, not just as power of attorney. The bank representative sounded uncomfortable as she explained. "Your son added his name back in October, Mrs. Carter. We have the signed paperwork on file." October, 3 months ago. While I was helping decorate the church for Harvest Festival, while I was baking pumpkin bread to send to Thomas and Melissa, while I was still planning Thanksgiving dinner, they were already taking control of my money. I hung up without responding to the representative's concerned questions. At the county clerk's office, I requested property records for my house. My hands trembled as the clerk handed me the documents showing a quitclaim deed filed in November, transferring my home to the Carter Family Trust, an entity I knew nothing about. The clerk gave me a strange look when I gasped. "Is something wrong, Mrs. Carter? This isn't right," I whispered. "I never signed this." She frowned, examining the document more closely. "It has your notarized signature here. See?" I looked at the signature. It resembled mine, but something was off. The loop on the B in Libby was wrong, the slant different from my usual penmanship. "That's not my signature," I said firmly. The clerk's expression changed, professional neutrality giving way to concern. "If you believe there's fraud involved, you should speak to the police or an attorney." An attorney. Not Melissa's firm, obviously. Not anyone in Oakwood County where Thomas had connections through his legal practice. I'd need someone independent, someone with no ties to my family. But attorneys cost money. Money I now realized I might not be able to access if Thomas controlled my accounts. Back home, I searched frantically through files for my estate planning documents. The original will I'd prepared after James died named Thomas as my sole beneficiary. It had seemed natural then. He was my only child, my future. Now that decision seemed like a terrible mistake. The will wasn't in its usual place in my filing cabinet. Neither were my insurance policies or property deeds. The systematic removal of my important papers had happened right under my nose. My cell phone rang. Catherine again. I answered this time, needing information more than I needed to avoid confrontation. "Elizabeth, finally! We've been so worried," she said, her voice honeyed with false concern. "I'm sure you have been," I replied coolly. "Worried I might go to the authorities?" A pause. "What are you talking about? We're worried about your health. Your state of mind." "My state of mind is perfectly clear, Catherine. Clear enough to know my signature was forged on property documents." Another pause, longer this time. When she spoke again, her voice had lost its sugary quality. "Thomas said you might become paranoid. It's part of the condition." What condition would that be? The condition of discovering my family is stealing from me? Early onset dementia. The doctor saw signs months ago. Thomas has been trying to protect you, to manage things while you're still, mostly yourself. I almost dropped the phone. "What doctor? I haven't been diagnosed with anything." "Dr. Harrison, at your checkup in September. He called Thomas afterward, expressed concerns about cognitive decline. You must remember, you got lost driving home from the appointment." I hadn't gotten lost. I'd stopped at the garden center to buy fall mums, then at the grocery store for milk. A normal day running errands after a routine physical, where Dr. Harrison had said I was in excellent health for my age. He'd never mentioned cognitive concerns. Had he? "I want copies of those medical records," I demanded. "Thomas has them," Catherine replied smoothly. "He's been managing your health care. He'll bring them to the neurologist appointment on the 10th. You are planning to go, aren't you? It would look better for you to cooperate." Look better to whom? A judge? Was that where this was heading? A competency hearing where I'd be declared unable to manage my own affairs? The room seemed to tilt as I understood the full scope of what was happening. Not just taking my possessions, but erasing my agency, making me a non-person. "Why are you doing this?" I asked, voice barely above a whisper. Catherine sighed, as if explaining to a stubborn child. It's for your own good, Elizabeth, and for the family legacy. Thomas is worried you might make poor financial decisions as your condition progresses. The trust protects everything, keeps it in the family. The family, not me. I was apparently no longer considered part of it, just an inconvenient obstacle to family legacy. Assets to be managed, not a person with rights and dignity. I thought of my grandfather's clock in Thomas's hallway, my grandmother's jewelry being appraised by Melissa, Catherine clutching those silver candlesticks. Family heirlooms passed down through generations were now being claimed prematurely by people who saw them as valuable objects rather than repositories of memory and love. Elizabeth? Are you still there? Catherine prompted when I didn't respond. I'm here, I said. I've always been here. Taking care of everyone, remembering every birthday, supporting every ambition, being the backbone of this family while you all took and never gave back. That's not fair, she protested weakly. No, it's not fair. None of this is fair. I ended the call before she could respond. Standing in my kitchen, the kitchen where I'd taught Thomas to make pancakes, where I'd hosted countless family gatherings, where I'd cried alone after James's funeral, I felt something shift inside me. The hurt and shock were still there, but beneath them, something harder was forming. Determination, anger, a refusal to be erased from my own life story. I looked at the calendar hanging on the wall, still showing December because I hadn't felt like changing it to the new year. 9 days until the neurologist appointment they'd scheduled without my knowledge or consent. 9 days to figure out how to fight back against a son who was a lawyer, a daughter-in-law who worked at a law firm, and family members who'd already accepted their narrative that I was incompetent. I've always believed that understanding the past helps make sense of the present. As I sat at my kitchen table that night, nursing a cup of tea gone cold, memories flooded back, not confused or jumbled as they claimed, but crystal clear and cutting in their precision. I remember the day Thomas was born, a sweltering July afternoon in 1985, 27 hours of labor, James passing out when he tried to cut the umbilical cord, and then that perfect red-faced boy placed on my chest. He's all yours, Mama, the nurse had said. All mine. My responsibility, my joy, my future. James and I had tried for 5 years to have a baby, suffered 2 miscarriages before Thomas arrived. He was our miracle. When Thomas was 4, James left us for his 23-year-old secretary. No warning, just a note on the kitchen counter and half-empty closets. I need freedom, he'd written, as if a wife and child were chains rather than family. The divorce was quick but brutal. James had hidden assets, claimed financial hardship, left us with almost nothing. I didn't fight for more, too shocked and heartbroken to navigate the legal system effectively. We moved from our suburban house to a 2-bedroom apartment above Gino's Pizzeria on Main Street. I took a job at Johnson Manufacturing doing bookkeeping during the day and waited tables at night while my mother watched Thomas. Every spare penny went into a college fund for him. I wore secondhand clothes, cut my own hair, learned to repair everything from leaky faucets to worn shoe soles rather than replacing them. The sacrifices didn't feel like sacrifices at the time. They were investments in Thomas's future. When Thomas was 7, he came home crying because the other boys made fun of his worn-out sneakers. I stayed up all night sewing patches onto the aging fabric, painting them with colorful designs so they'd look intentionally unique rather than poor. The next day, he threw his arms around me, called me the best mom ever because his shoes were suddenly the coolest in school. That night, I ate crackers for dinner so I could put a few more dollars into his college fund. At 10, he developed asthma. The medical bills were overwhelming, even with my insurance from work. I sold my mother's cameo brooch, one of the few family heirlooms I'd managed to keep through the divorce, to pay for his inhaler and medications. I never told him where the money came from. I didn't want him to feel like a burden. When Thomas was 12, James died unexpectedly. Heart attack on a golf course. He'd barely seen his son in 8 years, sending occasional birthday cards with $20 bills tucked inside, making promises for visits that rarely materialized. At the funeral, Thomas stood stoic beside me, a boy trying to mourn a father he barely knew. Later, I learned James had remarried but never had more children. His new wife inherited everything, the house I'd helped choose, the savings account I'd contributed to during our marriage, the life insurance policy still listing him as my spouse because I couldn't afford to buy my own after the divorce. By then, I was managing the accounting department at Johnson's, finally making enough for us to move to a small rental house with a yard. Thomas thrived in high school. Honor roll, debate team, editor of the school newspaper. I attended every event, cheered at every competition, helped with homework late into the night, even when accounting principles were the extent of my mathematical knowledge. When he needed a suit for his first formal dance, I made it myself, studying men's tailoring techniques from library books. Sewing after he went to bed so he wouldn't know it wasn't store-bought. When college acceptance letters arrived his senior year, I sat with him at this very kitchen table, calculating costs, filling out scholarship applications, taking a third job cleaning office buildings on weekends to help cover what his scholarships wouldn't. He chose Dartmouth, my brilliant boy, first in our family to attend an Ivy League school. I remortgaged the small house I'd finally been able to buy, took out personal loans, worked 60-hour weeks to make it happen. The day I dropped him off at campus, I cried all the way home, tears of pride, exhaustion, and loneliness, knowing our little team of 2 was changing forever. Law school followed undergraduate, more expenses, more loans in my name because his credit wasn't established yet. "I'll pay you back, Mom," he promised. "Once I'm established, you'll never have to worry about money again." I believed him. Why wouldn't I? He was my son, my investment, my legacy. He met Melissa during his second year at Yale Law. Brilliant, beautiful, from a wealthy Connecticut family who vacationed in Europe and owned multiple properties. The first time I met her parents, I wore my best dress, already 5 years old, and could feel their assessment of my modest clothing, my simple jewelry, my hands with nails short and practical from years of physical work. They asked what James did for a living, and Thomas quickly interjected that his father had passed away, rather than explaining he'd abandoned us. I saw the subtle reshaping of our history beginning then, but dismissed it as youthful embarrassment. After law school, Thomas took a position at a prestigious firm in Hartford, not the public defender's office he'd once been passionate about, but corporate law with its higher salary and connection opportunities. "It's just to pay off student loans," he assured me. "I'll do the social justice work later." Later never came. Instead, promotions followed, then partnership, then the house in Oakwood Manor with 5 bedrooms for a family of 2. I remained in Millfield, continuing my job at Johnson's until retirement 2 years ago. My small pension combined with Social Security provided enough for comfort if not luxury. The house was finally paid off, my greatest achievement after educating Thomas. I had savings, modest investments, and the family heirlooms I'd protected through decades of financial struggle. My mother's jewelry, my father's watch, my grandparents' silver and furniture. Nothing of extraordinary monetary value, but priceless in sentimental worth and family history. Thomas and Melissa visited occasionally, major holidays, sometimes birthdays. Each visit featured subtle suggestions. Wouldn't I be happier in a condo without stairs to navigate? Wasn't the yard too much work for me now? Had I considered moving closer to them? I always declined politely, explaining that I loved my home, my garden, my community. My friends were here, my church, my volunteer work at the library and women's shelter, my life. 2 years ago, Thomas suggested adding his name to my accounts, for emergency purposes. After James's sudden death and the financial complications it caused, the suggestion seemed reasonable. I agreed, never imagining those emergency provisions would be used against me. Last year, after my fall on the ice, Thomas brought paperwork to the hospital, insurance forms, medical consents, and apparently buried among them a power of attorney document I signed while groggy from pain medication. I trusted my son implicitly. Why would I question documents he placed before me? All those years of sacrifice, of putting Thomas first, of believing that maternal love was the strongest bond in existence. Had it meant nothing? Or worse, had it taught him that I would always put his needs before my own, making me the perfect victim for his scheme? The grandfather clock in the living room, the one piece I'd kept from my parents' home through all the financial hardships, chimed midnight, January 3rd. 7 days until the neurologist appointment that could potentially label me incompetent and complete Thomas's takeover of my life and assets. 7 days to figure out how to fight back against my own child, the person I'd given everything to protect and nurture. I pulled a photo album from the bookshelf, one of the few Thomas hadn't yet removed from my home. Pictures of a gap-toothed boy holding up a fish he'd caught, a teenager in graduation cap and gown, a young man in law school regalia, all moments where I'd burst with pride, believing I'd succeeded in raising a good person despite the challenges. Had I been wrong all along? Or had something changed him? Ambition, Melissa's influence, simple greed. The last photo in the album showed Thomas, Melissa, and me at their housewarming party 5 years ago. I studied my son's face, searching for clues I might have missed. He wasn't smiling directly at the camera, but looking slightly aside, his expression more satisfied than happy. Melissa stood perfectly poised in designer clothes, her arm through his possessively. I stood slightly apart, still beaming with maternal pride, unaware that I was becoming an inconvenience rather than a beloved parent. I closed the album, suddenly clear about what I needed to do. The path forward wouldn't be easy, but I hadn't survived raising a child alone, working multiple jobs, and building a life from nothing by being weak or indecisive. Thomas had underestimated me. They all had. They saw an aging woman they could manipulate and control. They hadn't counted on the steel beneath the soft exterior, the determination that had sustained me through far worse challenges than this betrayal. January 4th dawned with an unexpected phone call that jerked me from troubled sleep. My boss from Johnson Manufacturing, retired now himself but still connected to the company, calling with concern in his voice. "Libby, it's Howard. I just got the strangest call from Thomas asking for copies of your performance reviews from your last 5 years with us. Said something about needing documentation of cognitive decline for a medical assessment." What the hell is going on? My stomach dropped as Howard continued. "I told him our HR records are confidential, but he said he has power of attorney and legal right to request them. Is that true? Are you okay?" The humiliation burned through me. Thomas contacting my former workplace, questioning my competence to people who had respected me professionally for decades. "Howard, I'm fine. There's no cognitive decline. There's a situation. He's trying to gain control of my assets." Howard's voice hardened. "Say no more. I know exactly what this is. My brother-in-law went through something similar with his kids. Elder financial abuse, they call it. The records request will get lost in the system. I promise you that. Elder abuse. The term hit me like a physical blow. Is that what this was? My own son, abusing me. The clinical terminology made it real in a way my emotional processing hadn't fully grasped. This wasn't just family drama or misunderstanding. It was potentially criminal. After thanking Howard, I made coffee with shaking hands. The kitchen window showed Ruth next door clearing snow from her walkway again. A normal January morning for everyone except me. I wondered how many other people Thomas had contacted. My doctor, my friends, my church group, spreading the narrative that I was declining mentally, priming everyone to dismiss anything I might say in my own defense. I was sipping coffee when a knock at the front door startled me. Through the peephole, I saw Melissa standing on my porch, dressed impeccably in a camel hair coat, leather gloves, and boots that probably cost more than my monthly pension. I considered not answering, but curiosity won out. "Elizabeth," she greeted me, all business. No hug, no warmth. "May I come in? We need to talk." I stepped aside wordlessly, noticing she'd brought a briefcase. Not a social call then, a business meeting. In my living room, the room where I'd read bedtime stories to Thomas, where he'd opened Christmas presents and built blanket forts, Melissa perched on the edge of the sofa, declining my automatic offer of coffee or tea. She opened her briefcase and removed a folder of documents. "I'll be direct," she said, legal training evident in her clipped, efficient tone. "Your behavior since Christmas has been concerning. Refusing calls, isolating yourself, making accusations of theft and forgery to Catherine. It only reinforces our concerns about your mental state." "My mental state is perfectly sound," I replied, struggling to keep my voice steady. "Unlike my trust in my family." She sighed, the sound practiced and theatrical. "Elizabeth, we're trying to help you. You're experiencing paranoia and confusion, which are textbook symptoms of early dementia. The neurologist appointment on the 10th will help establish appropriate care going forward." "I don't need appropriate care. I need my property returned and my financial accounts restored to my sole control." Melissa's perfect eyebrows arched. "That's not possible. Thomas has legal authority now, and frankly, Your reaction to these necessary changes only demonstrates why they were needed. She slid a document across the coffee table toward me. This is the agreement for Lakeview Memory Care. We've secured you a private suite starting February 1st. All your medical needs will be covered, and you'll have activities, peers, professional supervision. Professional supervision? I'm not a child or a criminal. I'm a competent adult who doesn't need or want to be placed in a facility. Her smile tightened. Elizabeth, be reasonable. The house is too much for you to maintain. You had that fall last winter. You've been forgetting appointments. What appointments have I forgotten? I challenged. She hesitated briefly. Thomas mentioned you missed lunch with him in November. We never had a lunch scheduled in November. Thomas canceled our usual Sunday call 3 weeks in a row, claiming work commitments. Melissa waved dismissively. These memory inconsistencies are exactly the problem. You're reconstructing events to fit your preferred narrative. The clinical psychobabble infuriated me. Stop. Just stop treating me like I'm crazy or stupid. I've managed my life successfully for 63 years. I raised Thomas alone, worked full-time, maintained a home, and saved for retirement despite numerous obstacles. I'm not suddenly incapable because I've passed 60. No one is saying you haven't lived an adequate life, Melissa replied. The slight pause before adequate cutting, deeper than any outright insult could have. But circumstances change. Health changes. Thomas is trying to protect the assets you worked so hard to accumulate. Protect them for whom? Not for me, clearly, since you're already dividing my possessions and planning to institutionalize me. She had the grace to look momentarily uncomfortable before recovering her professional demeanor. The family trust ensures everything stays within the family. I am the family. The words burst from me, loud enough that Melissa actually flinched. I built this family. I sacrificed everything for it. For Thomas. And this is how he repays me. By trying to erase me while I'm still alive. You're being dramatic, she said coldly. No one is trying to erase you. We're ensuring you get proper care while protecting family assets. If you'd just cooperate, get out of my house. My voice was quiet but firm. Elizabeth, get out. Now, before I call the police and report you for harassment. Melissa gathered her documents with efficient movements, tucking them back into her briefcase. This emotional outburst only confirms our concerns. I'll tell Thomas you're still resistant to reasonable solutions. We were hoping to avoid legal proceedings, but if you continue to be difficult, legal proceedings? You're threatening to sue me now? For what? The crime of wanting to control my own life and property? She stood, straightening her expensive coat. For competency evaluation through the courts, rather than the private assessment we've arranged. It would become public record, Elizabeth. Your neighbors, your church friends, everyone would know. Is that really what you want? The threat of public humiliation, of my private struggle being exposed to my community, was calculated to hurt and intimidate. I almost yielded, almost backed down from the confrontation out of ingrained politeness and maternal instinct to avoid embarrassing my son. Almost. Instead, I walked to the front door and held it open. I'll see you in court then. I have nothing to hide. Do you and Thomas? After she left, I collapsed onto the sofa, the magnitude of the threat overwhelming me. Court proceedings, public competency hearings, the potential for being legally declared incompetent to manage my own affairs, the shame of having everyone in Millfield witness my son trying to strip me of my autonomy. My phone rang. Thomas this time. I let it go to voicemail, listening as his message played. Mom, Melissa told me you're being unreasonable. This hostile attitude isn't helping anyone. The more you fight this, the more you're proving our point about your mental state. Just sign the Lakeview papers. We've already donated most of your furniture to charity since you won't need it, and we've listed the house with a realtor. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Donated my furniture? Listed my house? The room spun as I tried to process this latest violation. They were dismantling my life piece by piece, assuming my compliance or inability to fight back. Had Thomas always seen me as a possession rather than a person? A resource to be used and discarded when convenient? I stumbled to the bathroom, barely reaching the toilet before vomiting from stress and shock. In the mirror afterward, a stranger stared back, pale, shaking, eyes wide with fear. I'd never looked so old, so fragile. For a moment, I wondered if they were right. Maybe I wasn't capable of independent living anymore. Maybe this was all happening because I truly was declining and couldn't recognize it. No, I shut down that doubt immediately. This wasn't about my capabilities. It was about control and money. Thomas and Melissa's actions weren't those of concerned family members, but of predators targeting a vulnerable elder. Howard had named it correctly: elder abuse. My son had become my abuser. The grandfather clock chimed 3 times as I sat on the bathroom floor, back against the cold porcelain tub, trying to breathe through panic and heartbreak. This room where I'd bathed infant Thomas, taught him to brush his teeth, bandaged skinned knees, now a place I hid from the adult he'd become. An unexpected knock at the back door startled me from my stupor. Through the kitchen window, I saw Ruth standing on my back steps, holding a casserole dish, concern etched on her kind face. I couldn't hide forever. Sooner or later, I'd have to face the community that Thomas threatened to humiliate me in front of if I didn't comply with his plans. I opened the door, managed a weak smile. Ruth took one look at me and set the casserole on the counter, wrapping me in a hug without asking questions. We'd been neighbors for 30 years, had helped each other through Hugh's cancer and James's abandonment, shared gardening tips and holiday meals and early morning coffee. "Libby, honey, what's wrong? You've been hiding in there for days, and that fancy daughter-in-law of yours just left looking like she'd sucked a lemon. What's happening?" The simple kindness broke the dam. Through tears, the whole story poured out. Christmas Eve's discovery, the documents, the stolen heirlooms, the threatened court proceedings, the memory care facility, the house already listed for sale without my knowledge. Ruth listened without interrupting, her face growing increasingly thunderous. When I finished, she squeezed my hand tightly. Those vultures, those absolute vultures. Hugh always said that boy married above his character when he got that fancy lawyer wife. Seems he was right. "I don't know what to do, Ruth," I admitted. The confession costing my pride, but necessary. "They have legal documents. They've been planning this for months. They've already taken so much." "You fight," she said firmly. "My sister's a lawyer in Springfield, elder law specialist. We're calling her right now." Ruth's sister Marion arrived at my house the following morning, a whirlwind of energy despite being 70 herself. A petite woman with steel gray hair and a practical bob and reading glasses hanging from a beaded chain around her neck. She reminded me of a librarian rather than an attorney. But when she spoke, the sharp intelligence and no-nonsense attitude immediately commanded respect. "Elder law is my specialty," she explained as we sat at my kitchen table, Ruth making coffee while Marion organized documents I'd gathered overnight. "Unfortunately, cases like yours are increasingly common, even with loving families. Money changes people, and inheritance impatience is a real phenomenon. Adult children unwilling to wait for their parents to die naturally before accessing assets they view as eventually theirs anyway." She examined the power of attorney document Thomas had tricked me into signing. This is problematic but not insurmountable. You signed under duress in a medical setting without proper explanation of the document's implications. We can challenge this." For the first time since Christmas Eve, hope flickered. "Can you help me get my property back? My accounts?" Marion's expression turned serious. "I won't sugarcoat this, Libby. Legal battles against family members are emotionally devastating and often protracted. Thomas has professional legal resources through his firm and his wife's connections. They've been methodically building a case for your incompetence for months from what you've told me. This won't be quick or easy. I don't care how hard it is," I said firmly. "I need to fight this." She nodded approvingly. "That's the attitude we need. First step is documenting everything, creating a paper trail proving your competence and their manipulation. We'll get medical evaluations from independent doctors, not their chosen specialists. We'll need financial records showing the timeline of their actions, and character witnesses from your community attesting to your continued competence and independence." Ruth squeezed my shoulder supportively. "Everyone in Millfield knows Libby. We've all seen her running the church rummage sale, organizing the library fundraiser, keeping her own books and home in perfect order. Nobody who actually knows her would believe this dementia nonsense." The word dementia still made me flinch. The stigma, the fear, the cultural images of vacant-eyed elders unable to recognize loved ones. I'd seen my own mother decline from Alzheimer's in her late 70s, knew the genuine symptoms and progression. What I was experiencing, occasional forgetfulness about where I'd put my reading glasses, sometimes struggling to recall an actor's name from an old movie, was normal aging. not cognitive impairment. Thomas was weaponizing normal senior moments and society's fear of aging to serve his financial interests. Marion outlined our counteroffensive. First, we establish independent evidence of your cognitive health. I'll arrange appointments with a geriatric specialist and neuropsychologist, not connected to Thomas's chosen doctors. Second, we document the timeline of financial transactions and property transfers occurring without your informed consent. Third, we file for an emergency injunction preventing further transfers or property sales pending resolution. Can we get back what's already been taken? I asked, thinking of my grandmother's jewelry, my father's watch, the family photos and heirlooms already distributed among relatives at Christmas. Potentially, though, physical items are trickier than financial assets. We'll include them in our legal demands, but be prepared for a fight. Marion removed her glasses, fixing me with a direct gaze. Most importantly, Libby, you need to shift your thinking from, my beloved son would never intentionally hurt me, to, I'm facing opponents who've demonstrated willingness to deceive and manipulate me for financial gain. Their biological relationship to you is irrelevant to the legal proceedings. The blunt assessment stung, but rang true. I needed to stop seeing this through the lens of maternal heartbreak and start viewing it as the legal and financial attack it was. Thomas had made his choice, had been making it methodically for months, possibly years. The sweet boy I'd sacrificed everything for existed now only in memories and photographs. I understand, I said quietly. Tell me what to do next. Marion and Ruth stayed through the afternoon, helping me gather documents, photograph rooms showing my organized living conditions, and create a journal documenting my daily activities and mental clarity. We changed locks on all doors. Ruth's husband Jim handled the installation, and installed a simple security camera at the front door, connected to my phone. No more surprise visits from Thomas or Melissa without warning. After they left, I sat in my living room as evening shadows lengthened, feeling different than I had just hours before. The paralysis of betrayal and shock was giving way to something else, a cold, clear determination I barely recognized in myself. This house, my home for 40 years, suddenly felt like a fortress to be defended rather than a repository of warm memories. The framed photos of Thomas throughout his life, which I'd always displayed proudly, now seemed like monuments to a person who no longer existed. I moved through rooms purposefully, gathering those photographs, removing them from walls and shelves, not destroying them. I couldn't bring myself to do that yet, but placing them face down in a box in the spare bedroom closet, out of sight, if not entirely out of mind or heart. In their place, I positioned photos I'd previously kept in albums, images of myself at various life stages. Elizabeth at 21 in college, Libby at 30, holding infant Thomas, but with the focus on my proud new mother smile rather than the baby. Elizabeth at 40, receiving an employee recognition award at Johnson Manufacturing. Libby at 50, standing beside the garden I'd cultivated from nothing. Recent photos of me with Ruth and other friends at community events, evidence of my continued social engagement and activity. The visual shift was symbolic but powerful, reclaiming space that had been dominated by Thomas's milestones and achievements, reasserting my own identity and story as the primary narrative of my life. I had been a person before becoming a mother. I was still a person now, with value and purpose beyond that role. My phone rang. Thomas again. The third call today. This time, following Marion's advice, I answered and immediately activated the call recording app she'd installed on my phone. Mom? Finally. Why haven't you been answering? His tone was exasperated, as if I were a wayward teenager rather than his parent. I've been busy, I replied calmly, consulting with my attorney about the unauthorized transfers from my accounts and removal of my personal property. Silence. Then, your attorney? Mom, what are you talking about? Marion Levinson, elder law specialist. She's helping me address the financial exploitation and prepare for the competency proceedings you and Melissa have threatened. More silence, then a complete shift in tone. The Thomas I remembered, voice softening with concern. Mom, please. We're not exploiting you. We're trying to protect you and your assets. You're getting confused, making accusations. The bank records showing transfers I never authorized aren't confusion, Thomas. Neither is the property deed with a signature that isn't mine, or the listing agreement for this house that I never signed. Those are documented facts. Mom, he started, But I interrupted, following the script Marion had helped me prepare. I'm not discussing this further without my attorney present. If you wish to communicate, you can do so through her office. I've instructed her to file for an emergency injunction against further financial transactions or property sales pending resolution of these issues. You can't be serious, he said, disbelief evident. You're hiring an attorney against your own son? After everything I've done for you? The question ignited something in me. Indignation, yes, but also a sudden clarity about our relationship's true nature. Everything you've done for me? Thomas, I gave you everything. Every dollar, every opportunity, every sacrifice. What exactly have you done for me that wasn't ultimately self-serving? I've been trying to protect you from yourself. Your memory is failing. You're making poor decisions. Documented evidence suggests the opposite. My financial records show consistent, responsible management until you gained access to my accounts. My medical records show no diagnosis of cognitive impairment, something we'll establish further with independent evaluations. The only poor decision I made was trusting you implicitly. His voice hardened. If this is how you want to play it, fine. But a court battle will be public, expensive, and stressful. Is that really how you want to spend what could be your final good years? Fighting your own family in court, rather than enjoying a comfortable retirement at Lakeview with all your needs met? The thinly veiled threat might have intimidated me days ago. Now it only strengthened my resolve. Goodbye, Thomas. Have your attorney contact Marion Levinson for all future communications. After ending the call, I sat perfectly still, heart racing but mind surprisingly calm. The conversation represented more than just following legal advice. It was my declaration of independence, my refusal to be manipulated through familial obligation or emotional blackmail. The Thomas I'd raised would have been proud of such strength. The Thomas who existed now would see it as an obstacle to his plans. The grandfather clock chimed 8 times as I made a simple dinner, scrambled eggs and toast, comfort food from my childhood. As I ate at the kitchen table, I realized this was the first meal in days that I'd actually tasted rather than mechanically consumed. The first evening I'd spent planning for my future, rather than mourning my past. This wasn't the retirement I'd envisioned, certainly, but perhaps it was the awakening I needed. A harsh but necessary lesson that my value wasn't determined by my role as Thomas's mother, and my purpose wasn't limited to preserving assets for his eventual inheritance. I had a life still to live, on my own terms, whether he approved or not. The morning of January 7th, 3 days before the neurologist appointment Thomas had scheduled, I woke with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. Marion's strategy was unfolding methodically. Independent medical evaluations scheduled, emergency injunction paperwork filed, documentation of unauthorized financial transactions compiled. But a persistent question nagged at me. Why now? What had triggered Thomas's sudden urgency to gain control of my assets after years of relative indifference to my financial situation? The answer came unexpectedly, while I was sorting through old files in my home office, looking for additional documentation to support Marion's case. Behind a folder of tax returns, I discovered a letter I'd completely forgotten about, from Johnson Manufacturing's corporate headquarters, dated 3 months ago. I scanned it quickly, heart racing as understanding dawned. The property where the Johnson factory stood, prime real estate near the interstate, was being sold to a developer planning a mixed-use complex of upscale condominiums, retail space, and offices. As part of the deal, all former employees with at least 20 years of service were receiving a one-time appreciation bonus based on years worked. With my 27 years, my bonus would be substantial, $175,000 to be paid on February 15th. I'd received the letter during a week when I was volunteering at the church's annual rummage sale, had set it aside intending to call for more information, then forgotten about it completely amid holiday preparations. I'd never mentioned it to Thomas, because I simply hadn't remembered it existed. But someone else knew. Someone had calculated exactly when to strike, when to ensure they had control of my finances before this windfall arrived. With shaking hands, I called Marion. I think I know why they're moving so quickly, I explained, describing the letter and bonus payment timeline. February 15th, she mused. And they wanted you in Lakeview by February 1st, with the house already listed for sale. The timing isn't coincidental. But how would Thomas know about this bonus? I never told him. Someone at Johnson must have mentioned it, maybe to Thomas directly, or to someone who passed the information to him. Small towns, Libby. Information travels. The revelation cemented my resolve. This wasn't just opportunistic financial exploitation. It was a calculated plan timed precisely to capture a specific asset. The thought of Thomas and Melissa sitting in their elegant home, calendaring the optimal moment to declare me incompetent based on a corporate payment schedule, made me physically ill. Marion advised documenting the bonus letter as additional evidence of their motivations. This helps our narrative considerably. Shows clear financial incentive for their sudden concern about your cognitive health, exactly 3 months before a major cash payment. After hanging up, I went to the garden shed, retrieving the spare key I kept hidden there for emergencies. Not the house key, Thomas already had that, but the key to a safe deposit box at Millfield Community Bank. A box registered solely in my name, established long before adding Thomas to any accounts, containing items I'd considered too valuable to keep at home. My mother's original wedding ring, not the larger diamond James had replaced it with after his first big promotion, my grandfather's military medals, birth certificates, and a document I'd almost forgotten about. At the bank, the manager greeted me warmly. "Mrs. Carter, haven't seen you access your box in quite some time." "Everything all right?" "Just fine, George. Doing some estate organizing." I kept my tone casual, following Marion's advice not to discuss my legal situation widely until our strategy was fully implemented. In the private viewing room, I opened the box with hands that barely trembled. There, beneath the small velvet pouch containing my mother's ring, lay a sealed envelope I'd placed there 15 years ago, after Thomas graduated law school, but before he married Melissa. Inside was a document I'd had prepared during a period of tension between us, when his new corporate values and dismissive attitude toward my small-town life had created a painful rift. The original will I'd created after James died had left everything to Thomas unconditionally. This updated version, never registered with the courts, but legally prepared and witnessed, told a different story. In it, I bequeathed specific family heirlooms to various cousins and friends who'd appreciate their sentimental rather than monetary value. My house would go to a trust benefiting the Millfield Women's Shelter, where I'd volunteered for decades. Financial assets would be divided, half to Thomas, but only if he had demonstrated consistent care and concern for me in my later years, with the other half funding scholarships for Johnson Manufacturing employees' children attending college. I'd never told Thomas about this revised will, had even considered destroying it in recent years as our relationship improved. Now it seemed prescient, a document created during a moment of maternal disappointment that had proven more insightful than I'd realized. The will itself wasn't immediately actionable. It would only take effect upon my death. But it represented something powerful, evidence that even years ago, I'd had concerns about Thomas's character and values significant enough to create legal provisions protecting my assets from his complete control. It directly contradicted the narrative that my current resistance was due to confusion or paranoia, showing instead a consistent pattern of justified caution regarding my son's trustworthiness with family legacy. Back home, I called Marion again, describing the document. "Bring it to my office immediately," she instructed. "This is exactly the kind of evidence that strengthens our case about your long-term competence and awareness. It shows that concerns about Thomas's character aren't new or delusional, but based on patterns you've observed for years." As I prepared to drive to Springfield, another unexpected visitor arrived, Catherine, looking uncomfortable on my doorstep. The security camera had alerted me to her presence before she knocked, giving me time to decide whether to answer. Curiosity won out again. "Elizabeth," she greeted me stiffly when I opened the door. "May I come in? I'd rather not have this conversation where neighbors might overhear." I considered refusing, but decided information gathering outweighed my desire to avoid her. "Briefly, I have an appointment shortly." In the living room, now transformed with my own photos rather than Thomas's, Catherine perched awkwardly on the edge of a chair, declining refreshments. She glanced around, noticing the changes to the decor. "You've been redecorating?" "Reclaiming," I corrected. "What brings you here, Catherine? More documents for me to sign? More family heirlooms to inventory?" She flinched at my directness. "Actually, I wanted to return these." From her purse, she withdrew my grandmother's silver candlesticks, carefully wrapped in cloth. "They belong here with you, not elsewhere." I accepted them silently, waiting for the explanation I sensed was coming. "Thomas called me last night, quite upset," she continued. Said you've hired an attorney, are challenging the power of attorney, threatening lawsuits. He wanted me to try talking sense into you before things escalate further. And you agreed to come because... She twisted her wedding ring nervously. Because I'm starting to think we've made a terrible mistake. The way Thomas described your conversation, your clarity, your specific references to documents and transactions, it doesn't sound like someone with dementia. And frankly, the rush to sell your house and move you to Lakeview seems excessive. A crack in the unified front. Interesting. What changed your mind, Catherine? You were quite comfortable taking my heirlooms at Christmas. Her cheeks flushed with shame. I believed what Thomas told us, that you were declining rapidly, that everything needed to be secured before you gave away valuable family items to random people, or were taken advantage of financially. He showed us doctors' notes, assessments. Fabricated or misrepresented, I interrupted. I've requested all my medical records. There's no diagnosis of cognitive impairment. Catherine looked genuinely shocked. But Thomas said, Thomas lied, to serve his own interests. She was silent for a long moment, absorbing this. There's something else you should know, she finally said, voice lowered conspiratorially. Thomas and Melissa are having serious financial problems. The Oakwood house is underwater. They refinanced during the market peak to pay for renovations and lifestyle upgrades. His firm's biggest client left last year, and Melissa was passed over for partner again. They're not as financially secure as they appear. The revelation clicked another puzzle piece into place. Not just greed motivated them, but desperation. Financial pressure creating urgency to access any available assets, including mine. The Johnson manufacturing bonus was likely the tipping point in a longer-term plan, explaining the accelerated timeline. Why are you telling me this? I asked cautiously. Catherine sighed heavily. Because what's happening doesn't feel right. I went along with it at first, believing we were protecting you and the family legacy. But seeing you now, hearing you speak so clearly about what's happening, I can't be part of this. Will you make a statement to that effect? Officially through my attorney? She hesitated, caught between family loyalty and conscience. I need to think about it. Thomas is still my nephew, and this could destroy his career if it becomes public. Legal ethics violations, potential fraud charges. He should have considered that before attempting to steal my life, I replied, without sympathy. The candlesticks are a start, Catherine. But returning what should never have been taken isn't enough. Justice requires truth-telling. After she left, promising to consider her options and return other items she'd taken, I sat holding my grandmother's candlesticks, feeling their familiar weight and contours. Silver tarnishes when neglected, but can be restored with proper care. Perhaps the same was true of truth and justice, tarnished temporarily by deception, but capable of being polished back to brightness. The security camera alerted me to another arrival. Ruth, coming to drive me to Marion's office since my own car was making concerning noises lately. As I carefully rewrapped the candlesticks, a strange sense of power settled over me. Not just from the tangible evidence accumulating for our legal case, but from something deeper. The rediscovery of my own voice, boundaries, and determination after decades of placing others' needs, especially Thomas's, before my own. Thomas had underestimated me catastrophically, assuming age had weakened rather than strengthened me. He'd forgotten, or perhaps never truly understood, that the softness he mistook for vulnerability was actually resilience developed through years of overcoming obstacles and solving problems independently. The mother who'd worked multiple jobs to provide his opportunities hadn't disappeared just because her hair had grayed and her step had slowed. As Ruth's car pulled into my driveway, I gathered my purse and the safe deposit box contents, including the alternate will. The document represented more than just different inheritance instructions. It was evidence that even years ago, part of me had recognized the need for protection against the very situation I now faced. My subconscious had known what my heart hadn't been ready to accept, that the beautiful boy I'd raised had grown into a man capable of calculating betrayal. The weekend before the scheduled neurologist appointment became a whirlwind of strategic preparation. Marion converted her small law office into command central for what she now called Operation Dignity Defense. Ruth brought sandwiches and coffee. Jim installed additional security measures at my house, motion sensor lights, a video doorbell to complement the existing camera. 3 other neighbors took shifts monitoring my property when I was away, watching for unexpected visits from Thomas or Melissa. Small-town networks activated powerfully once word began spreading, not through gossip, but through purposeful, protected information channels Marion carefully orchestrated. My former colleagues from Johnson Manufacturing provided affidavits about my continued mental acuity during my final working years and recent interactions. My church pastor documented my ongoing leadership of the Rummage Sale Committee, noting my detailed organizational systems and reliable follow-through. The library director attested to my volunteer work teaching senior computer literacy classes, hardly an activity someone with cognitive decline would successfully manage. On Saturday morning, I underwent comprehensive cognitive and neuropsychological testing with an independent specialist Marion arranged. 4 hours of rigorous assessment evaluating memory, reasoning, language skills, spatial awareness, and executive function. The results were unequivocal. I showed normal age-appropriate changes, but no signs of dementia or significant cognitive impairment. My performance on financial decision-making scenarios was particularly strong, directly contradicting Thomas's claims that I couldn't manage my affairs. This report alone destroys a significant portion of their case, Marion explained as we reviewed the results in her office. But we're building redundant evidence, multiple independent confirmations of your competence that can't be dismissed as a single favorable evaluation. Sunday brought another unexpected development. Catherine called, requesting a meeting at Marion's office rather than my home. She arrived carrying a large shopping bag and a folder of documents. "I've made my decision," she announced without preamble. "I can't be part of this anymore. It's wrong, and I suspect it's illegal." From the shopping bag, she removed more of my belongings, the remaining candlestick, 2 silver picture frames, and a small jewelry box containing my mother's brooch. "There's more at Thomas's house I couldn't access without raising suspicion, but I've documented everything I saw there that belongs to you." From the folder, she produced photographs taken surreptitiously with her phone, images of my possessions arranged in Thomas and Melissa's home, my grandfather's clock in their hallway, my grandmother's quilt draped over their guest bed, my mother's china displayed in their dining room cabinet. Most significantly, Catherine provided a detailed timeline of conversations where Thomas had discussed his plans with family members, dating back over a year. He started floating the idea of helping Mom downsize around last January, she explained. Initially, it seemed reasonable. Many seniors do need assistance transitioning to smaller homes. But by summer, the narrative had shifted to concerns about your mental capacity. He mentioned doctor's appointments, memory lapses, confusion, none of which I personally observed when interacting with you. Marion took detailed notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions about specific dates or comments. Did Thomas ever explicitly state his intention to gain control of Elizabeth's finances or property before she was ready to relinquish them? Catherine nodded uncomfortably. At a family dinner in September, he mentioned adding his name to your accounts just in case. When my husband asked if you'd agreed to this, Thomas said something like, "Mom doesn't always know what's best for her anymore." Melissa added that they were managing the situation delicately. The systematic nature of their manipulation became increasingly clear as Catherine continued her account. Thomas had methodically isolated me over the past year, suggesting to extended family that my hearing difficulties made phone calls frustrating. I have mild age-related hearing loss but manage perfectly well with my phone's volume adjusted, implying that visits tired me excessively, and gradually positioning himself as the gatekeeper for family communications. He'd created just enough distance between me and potential supporters to execute his plan without immediate detection. Catherine's testimony strengthened our legal position tremendously, providing not just a family member's perspective contradicting Thomas's claims, but also documentation of the coordinated effort to separate me from my property before any court had declared me incompetent. Marion immediately prepared an affidavit capturing Catherine's statements, which she signed without hesitation. "I'll likely be excommunicated from family gatherings after this," she said ruefully, "but I couldn't live with myself otherwise." "Truth has costs," Marion acknowledged, "but significantly less than allowing injustice to proceed unchallenged." By Sunday evening, our counteroffensive was fully prepared. Marion had filed emergency motions to freeze all my accounts pending court review, documented the unauthorized property transfers, submitted the independent medical evaluations confirming my competence, and compiled affidavits from community members attesting to my continued functional independence. The alternate will I'd created years earlier served as powerful evidence that concerns about Thomas's trustworthiness weren't new or paranoia-driven, but based on long-term patterns I'd recognized even during his younger years. The final piece arrived unexpectedly Sunday night. A call from Dr. Harrison, my regular physician, returning my message from earlier in the week. "Mrs. Carter, I just reviewed the records Thomas requested regarding cognitive assessments," he said, sounding troubled. "I want to be absolutely clear. I have never diagnosed you with dementia or any form of cognitive impairment. Our last physical showed normal, age-appropriate changes, but nothing concerning enough to document in your chart or discuss with family members. Thomas claimed you called him after my September appointment expressing concerns," I said. "Absolutely not," Dr. Harrison replied firmly. "That would violate HPA regulations without your explicit consent, which you never provided. Furthermore, there were no concerning findings to report. I'd be willing to provide a formal statement to that effect if needed." Another fabrication exposed. Thomas had apparently invented medical concerns to justify his actions to family members, perhaps even forging or altering documents he'd shown Catherine. The extent of the deception was breathtaking and heartbreaking. This wasn't opportunistic exploitation, but a carefully constructed fraud executed by my own son. Monday morning, the day of the scheduled neurologist appointment Thomas had arranged, dawned clear and cold. Instead of attending that appointment, I sat in Marion's office as she filed our complete legal package with the county court. By noon, a judge had reviewed our emergency motions and granted temporary orders freezing all accounts and preventing any further property transfers, pending a formal hearing scheduled for January 20th. The neurologist appointment Thomas had scheduled was rendered moot by the independent evaluations we'd already completed and submitted to the court. Marion called Thomas's cell phone from her office landline, ensuring he wouldn't recognize the number and decline the call. I watched her face as she delivered our response to his manipulations. Professional, calm, but unflinching in outlining the legal actions we'd initiated. She placed the call on speaker so I could hear. "This is Marion Levinson, attorney for Elizabeth Carter. I'm calling to inform you that emergency injunctions have been granted freezing all of Mrs. Carter's accounts and preventing any property transfers pending court review. Additionally, we've filed documentation contradicting claims regarding Mrs. Carter's cognitive status, including independent medical evaluations confirming her competence. A hearing is scheduled for January 20th at 10 a.m. I suggest you retain independent counsel immediately, as there may be conflicts of interest with your or your wife's firms given the nature of these proceedings." Thomas's initial response was silence, then sputtering indignation. "This is absurd. My mother is clearly not thinking clearly. She's being manipulated by neighbors or—" Marion cut him off sharply. "Mr. Carter, I advise against making further unsubstantiated claims about your mother's cognitive status. The court has preliminary evidence suggesting these assertions are not only incorrect, but potentially deliberately misleading. As an attorney yourself, you should understand the serious ethical implications of such behavior." The mention of ethical implications, code for potential disbarment proceedings if fraud was proven, silenced him momentarily. When he spoke again, his tone had shifted from indignation to calculation. "What exactly are you hoping to accomplish here? Dragging family matters through public courts benefits no one. Protecting Mrs. Carter's legal rights and property from unauthorized appropriation benefits her considerably," Marion replied coolly. "The scope of potential consequences extends beyond civil matters into potential criminal charges for financial exploitation of an elder, fraudulent use of power of attorney, and possibly forgery regarding property transfers. I strongly recommend you consult criminal defense counsel in addition to civil representation." After the call ended, Marion smiled at me approvingly. "Well done, Libby. The first phase is complete. We've stopped the immediate threat to your assets and established strong groundwork for the court hearing. Now comes the waiting, which is often the hardest part." I nodded, feeling both exhausted and exhilarated. "What happens next?" "Thomas and Melissa have two options: back down completely, returning everything they've taken and withdrawing all claims about your competency, or proceed to the hearing and face both legal consequences and public exposure. Based on his response, I suspect they'll attempt a third option, seeking private settlement discussions to minimize damage to their reputations and careers. And if they propose settlement?" Marion's expression turned serious. "That decision will be entirely yours, Libby. Some clients prioritize recovering assets with minimal conflict. Others feel justice requires full public accountability. There's no right answer, only what brings you the most peace going forward. Peace. The concept seemed distant after weeks of turmoil. What would restore my sense of security and rightness in the world? Financial restitution alone couldn't heal the fundamental breach of trust. The son I'd believed in and sacrificed for had revealed himself willing to erase my autonomy for financial gain. No court ruling or settlement agreement could repair that shattered foundation. As I drove home, back to the house that remained legally mine thanks to our swift legal action, I considered the path forward. The upcoming court date loomed not as a dreaded ordeal, but as an opportunity for truth-telling and boundary establishing. Whatever Thomas and Melissa had taken materially could potentially be restored through legal process. The greater loss, my naive trust in my son's character, was permanent, a grief I would carry forward regardless of legal outcomes. The grandmother's clock in my living room, identical to the one Thomas had taken from me, but this one purchased by Ruth from an antique shop as a gesture of solidarity, chimed 4 times as I settled into my favorite chair. The sound reminded me that time moves forward inexorably, carrying us all through seasons of joy, betrayal, loss, and recovery. The hour was difficult now, but it would pass. Another would follow. Life would continue, changed but not ended by this betrayal. The courthouse in Springfield buzzed with unusual energy on January 20th. Word had spread about the Carter family hearing, drawing attention from local legal circles curious about a case involving potential attorney misconduct. Thomas had indeed retained separate counsel, a stern-looking woman from Boston rather than anyone from his or Melissa's firms, suggesting he understood the serious nature of the allegations against him. I sat beside Marion at the plaintiff's table, dressed in a navy suit I'd worn to professional conferences during my working years, hair neatly styled, back straight, despite my nervousness. Ruth sat directly behind me in the gallery, along with several neighbors, church friends, and former colleagues who'd come to support me. The visible community presence sent a clear message. I was not isolated or abandoned as Thomas had attempted to portray me. Thomas and Melissa entered with their attorney just before the proceedings began. Thomas looked haggard, with dark circles under his eyes and a slight slump to his shoulders I'd never seen before. Melissa maintained her perfect exterior, but her typically confident stride had diminished to something more cautious. They didn't look at me directly, focusing instead on papers their attorney arranged before them. Judge Eleanor Winters presided, a woman in her early 60s with a reputation for no-nonsense efficiency and particular expertise in elder law matters. She reviewed the substantial documentation both sides had submitted before addressing the courtroom. These proceedings concerned serious allegations of elder financial exploitation, unauthorized use of power of attorney, and potential fraud regarding property transfers, she began. Before detailed arguments, I'd like to hear directly from the principals. Mrs. Elizabeth Carter, would you please approach the witness stand? My heart pounded as I was sworn in, but my voice remained steady as I answered the judge's initial questions about my background, health status, and living situation. She then asked me to describe in my own words the events that had led to these proceedings. Your Honor, on Christmas Eve, I arrived at my son's home for a planned family gathering, only to discover family members dividing my possessions and discussing plans for selling my house and placing me in a memory care facility, all without my knowledge or consent. When I questioned this, I was told Thomas had power of attorney and was acting in my best interest due to supposed cognitive decline. And had you authorized your son to have power of attorney? The judge asked. Not knowingly, Your Honor. I discovered he had added his name to my accounts months earlier without my understanding of what I was signing, and had taken a power of attorney document to the hospital after a minor fall last winter, presenting it among insurance forms when I was medicated for pain. I see. And regarding the claims of cognitive decline, have you been diagnosed with dementia or similar conditions by your physician? No, Your Honor. My regular doctor has provided a statement confirming he never diagnosed any cognitive impairment nor discussed such concerns with my son, despite Thomas claiming otherwise to family members. Independent neurological and psychological evaluations conducted this month confirm I have normal age-appropriate memory changes, but no impairment affecting my decision-making capacity. Judge Winters nodded. reviewing the medical documentation before turning to Thomas. "Mr. Carter, please approach the witness stand." Thomas moved forward with the stiff posture of someone heading toward unpleasant necessity. After being sworn in, he attempted a different narrative, one portraying his actions as motivated by concern rather than financial interest. "Your Honor, my mother has shown increasing signs of confusion and memory problems over the past year. As her only child, I felt responsible for ensuring her safety and financial security before a crisis occurred. The power of attorney was obtained legitimately to protect her interests as her condition progressed. Yet her physicians document no such condition," Judge Winters noted, "and the timing of your actions, particularly regarding listing her house for sale and removing her possessions, coincided remarkably with her expected receipt of a substantial financial bonus from her former employer." Thomas shifted uncomfortably. "The timing was coincidental. We were simply trying to transition her to appropriate care before winter weather made moving more difficult. Without her knowledge or consent, and while describing her to family members as more impaired than medical evaluations indicate." The judge's skepticism was evident. "Mr. Carter, as an attorney yourself, you understand that power of attorney creates a fiduciary responsibility to act solely in the principal's best interest, not your own. The evidence suggests your actions served primarily to transfer your mother's assets to your control prior to any court determination of incapacity." The questioning continued, increasingly uncomfortable for Thomas, as the judge methodically contrasted his claims with documented evidence. Melissa testified briefly, attempting to support Thomas's version, but becoming flustered when confronted with contradictory evidence, particularly Catherine's testimony and photographs of my possessions in their home. After witness testimony concluded, Marion presented our comprehensive case: the timeline of unauthorized financial transactions, the forged property transfer documents, the contradictory medical evidence, and perhaps most damning, evidence that Thomas had misrepresented my cognitive status to family members and others to facilitate his financial maneuvers. Thomas's attorney offered limited defense, focusing primarily on his good intentions and suggesting a misunderstanding rather than deliberate exploitation. The strategy seemed aimed at damage control rather than outright victory, minimizing potential professional consequences rather than continuing to pursue control of my assets. After both sides presented closing arguments, Judge Winters delivered her ruling with unambiguous clarity. The court finds clear and convincing evidence that Thomas Carter obtained power of attorney through misrepresentation and subsequently violated his fiduciary responsibility to Elizabeth Carter through unauthorized financial transactions, property transfers without consent, and misrepresentation of her medical status to facilitate these actions. Therefore, the court invalidates the power of attorney agreement in its entirety. All accounts shall remain frozen except for Mrs. Carter's direct access. All property transfers executed under this invalid agreement are hereby reversed, with full title restored to Elizabeth Carter. Any personal property removed from her residence must be returned within 7 days or face additional penalties. Furthermore, given the serious nature of these actions, particularly from a licensed attorney who should understand fiduciary obligations, I am referring this matter to the State Bar Association for ethics review. Additional civil penalties of $25,000 are assessed against Thomas Carter for elder financial exploitation, payable to Elizabeth Carter within 30 days. Mrs. Carter, do you wish to pursue criminal charges regarding the document forgery and financial exploitation aspects of this case? The courtroom fell silent as all eyes turned to me. The question I'd been dreading. The final decision about how completely to sever the relationship with my only child. Criminal charges would likely end Thomas's legal career permanently, possibly even result in incarceration. Despite everything, the mother in me hesitated at delivering such a final blow to the child I'd raised. Your Honor, I request time to consider that decision separately from today's proceedings, I said finally. The immediate priority was stopping the exploitation and regaining control of my property. I'd prefer to deliberate on criminal proceedings after the dust settles from today's ruling. Judge Winters nodded understanding. The court respects that decision and will keep the criminal referral option open for 90 days should you choose to pursue it. This matter is hereby resolved in favor of the plaintiff, with all remedies as stated to be implemented immediately. The gavel struck with finality, and the formal proceedings ended. As people began moving in the courtroom, Thomas approached our table, his attorney hovering nervously nearby. "Mom," he began, voice low and strained. This isn't what I wanted. I stood to face him directly. This man who shared my blood, but had become a stranger. What did you want, Thomas? To take everything I've worked for before I was dead? To erase me from my own life for financial convenience? I was trying to protect you, he insisted, though the assertion sounded hollow even to his own ears, judging by his expression. No, you were protecting yourself, your lifestyle, your finances, your image, not me. Never me. My voice remained steady despite the grief constricting my chest. The Thomas I raised would never have done this. I don't know who you are anymore. Can we talk privately? Try to work through this? A note of desperation entered his voice as the reality of the situation. Professional consequences, financial penalties, public humiliation seemed to finally register fully. There's nothing to work through. The court has spoken. Return my property as ordered. Pay the penalties assessed. Deal with the bar association as required. Our personal relationship. I paused, the finality of what I was about to say weighing heavily. That requires healing. That may not be possible. Not now. Maybe not ever. Melissa appeared at his elbow, face tight with controlled anger. This didn't have to become a public spectacle, she hissed. We could have resolved this privately. You made that impossible when you tried to erase me from my own life, I replied calmly. There's no private resolution for attempting to declare someone incompetent for financial gain. As they walked away, Thomas looking back once with an expression I couldn't quite interpret, Marion placed a supportive hand on my shoulder. You did it, Libby. Your life remains your own, on your terms. Outside the courthouse, winter sunlight cast long shadows across the steps as my friends gathered around me. Ruth hugged me tightly, whispering, I'm so proud of you. Others offered similar sentiments, admiration for my courage, relief at the outcome, anger at what Thomas had attempted. I accepted their support gratefully, but felt strangely detached from the victory. Yes, I'd regained legal control of my life and assets. Yes, justice had been formally served through the court's ruling. But the emotional landscape had been permanently altered. The maternal relationship I'd centered my identity around for decades revealed as fundamentally different from what I'd believed it to be. As we drove back to Millfield, I gazed out at the winter-brown fields stretching toward distant horizons. The bare trees stood stark against the sky, stripped of summer foliage but still firmly rooted, still alive despite their temporary barrenness. There was wisdom in that image, the understanding that some seasons require standing exposed and vulnerable before new growth becomes possible. The Thomas I'd raised and loved still existed in my memory and heart, separate now from the man the court had ruled against today. Perhaps that separation was necessary, allowing me to honor the decades of motherhood while acknowledging its painful conclusion. The future stretched before me differently than I'd imagined at 63, not centered around grandchildren or family holidays, but around something more fundamental. Selfhood reclaimed, dignity defended, independence preserved. Spring arrived gradually in Millfield, as it always does, first with subtle shifts in light quality, then with tentative crocuses pushing through lingering snow, finally with definitive maple buds and birdsong. I watched the transformation from my living room window, from the garden bench, from the front porch swing, witnessing the annual renewal with fresh eyes after a winter of profound personal change. The court's orders had been implemented fully, if reluctantly. My bank accounts were restored to my sole control. My house remained securely mine. The attempted transfer reversed completely. Most of my possessions had been returned, delivered by a moving company rather than Thomas personally. Boxes stacked neatly in my garage for me to unpack and restore to their proper places in my home. Some items never came back. My mother's diamond tennis bracelet, my father's pocket watch, a few pieces of silver and china. Whether lost, sold, or deliberately withheld, I couldn't know for certain. I chose not to pursue these specific items further, the emotional cost of continued conflict outweighing their material value, even the sentimental connections they represented. The financial penalty Judge Winters imposed arrived via cashier's check with no accompanying note. Thomas paid exactly what was required, no more, no less. The State Bar Association had launched their ethics investigation, proceeding with methodical professional review rather than emotional family dynamics. Marion kept me updated on developments, though I'd chosen not to actively participate beyond my initial statement. I never pursued criminal charges. After careful consideration and many conversations with Marion, Ruth, and my pastor, I concluded that the civil remedies had accomplished what I needed most: regaining control of my life and assets, establishing clear boundaries, and creating public accountability for Thomas's actions. Criminal proceedings would extend the conflict without serving my healing process or future well-being. The decision wasn't forgiveness exactly, but a choice to direct my energy toward reconstruction rather than additional retribution. Thomas made 3 attempts at contact in the months following the hearing. A formal letter of apology that read more like legal risk management than genuine contrition. A birthday card containing a gift certificate to a local restaurant, returned unopened. A phone message asking if we could start rebuilding our relationship slowly, that I acknowledged with a brief text. Not ready for that. Please respect my boundaries. Melissa filed for divorce in April, moving back to Connecticut to join her family's law firm. The news reached me through Catherine, who had maintained cautious contact after her pivotal role in the court proceedings. Thomas was selling the Oakwood Manor house, too expensive to maintain on a single income, especially with his professional standing damaged by the ethics investigation. I felt no satisfaction in these developments, just a dull ache for what might have been had different choices been made. My own life took unexpected turns as spring progressed toward summer. The Johnson manufacturing bonus arrived as scheduled in February, $175,000 that I could now use according to my own priorities rather than Thomas's plans. After careful consideration, I allocated the funds to 3 purposes: home improvements I'd long delayed, a generous donation to the Millfield Women's Shelter, and a newly established scholarship fund for single parents pursuing education while raising children alone. The scholarship became my passion project, working with the local community foundation to structure criteria favoring parents who, like I had once been, were working multiple jobs while studying and raising children independently. The first awards would be announced in August, 5 scholarships of $5,000 each that I hoped might make someone else's difficult journey a little easier. Not the legacy I'd once envisioned passing through family generations, but perhaps a more meaningful one, helping strangers who faced the same struggles I had overcome. On a warm June afternoon, I sat in my newly refreshed garden, perennial beds exploding with color after attentive spring care. Ruth joined me for iced tea, settling comfortably in the chair beside mine with the ease of decades-long friendship. "The hydrangeas are magnificent this year," she commented, admiring the massive blue blooms along the fence line. "Everything looks so vibrant. Amazing what proper care can accomplish," I replied, noting the metaphor's application beyond horticulture. My own renewal had been similarly dramatic. Health improved through better sleep and reduced stress, confidence rebuilt through setting and maintaining boundaries, joy rediscovered through community connections and meaningful projects. "Have you heard anything more from Thomas?" Ruth asked carefully, respecting my privacy, but offering space to discuss difficult topics if needed. I shook my head. Not since the text exchange in May. I think he's finally accepting that reconciliation isn't a simple matter of time passing. Some breaches require fundamental rebuilding, not just superficial repairs. "And are you open to that rebuilding eventually? If he demonstrates genuine change?" The question deserved thoughtful consideration rather than reflexive response. I watched a hummingbird hover near the bee balm, wings a blur of perpetual motion, before answering. "I don't know. The mother in me wants to say yes immediately, wants to believe transformation is always possible, forgiveness always healing, but the woman in me, the person beyond the maternal role, remains cautious. Trust, once fractured so fundamentally, may never fully restore to its original state." Ruth nodded understanding. "Like a mended vase, potentially beautiful and functional again, but with visible repair lines, structural vulnerability at the breakpoints." Exactly. And accepting that changed reality is part of my journey now, recognizing that some relationships may never return to their original form, and that's not necessarily failure. We sipped our tea in comfortable silence as afternoon light gilded the garden. After a while, Ruth gestured toward a small notebook on the table between us. "Working on something new?" I smiled, touching the leather cover affectionately. "A memoir, believe it or not." Marion suggested it initially as documentation for the legal proceedings, but it's evolved into something more personal, my story in my own words, not defined primarily through motherhood or the recent conflict, but as a complete life journey. "I'd love to read it someday if you're willing to share," Ruth said. "You're featured prominently," I assured her. The section on friendship and community support practically revolves around you and Jim. Another comfortable silence settled before Ruth spoke again, her tone reflective. You know what strikes me most about everything that's happened since Christmas? Your resilience. Not just surviving betrayal, but emerging stronger, more fully yourself. You didn't just reclaim your legal rights. You reclaimed your entire identity beyond being Thomas's mother. Her observation crystallized something I'd felt but not fully articulated. For decades, I'd defined myself primarily through maternal sacrifice and devotion, measuring my worth through Thomas's achievements and our relationship. The painful fracturing of that connection had forced me to recognize myself as complete and valuable independent of that role. Not just Elizabeth Carter, mother of Thomas, but Libby Carter, woman, friend, community member, scholarship founder, garden tender, memoir writer, survivor. Life rarely follows the narrative we imagine for ourselves, I reflected. I never envisioned being essentially estranged from my only child at 64. Never imagined creating a legal defense against my own son. Never pictured rebuilding my life independently at this stage. Yet, here I am, doing exactly that, and finding unexpected fulfillment in the process. Here you are, indeed, Ruth agreed, raising her glass in a small toast. And we're all better for it. Later that evening, alone in my kitchen, I added another entry to the memoir journal, not focused on loss or betrayal, but on discovery and renewal. The most profound lesson from this journey has been understanding that our worth isn't determined by how others value us, even those closest to us, even those we've sacrificed everything for. Worth comes from within, from the quiet dignity of living authentically, from extending kindness where possible, and setting boundaries where necessary, from continuing to grow and contribute regardless of age or circumstance. Thomas once believed he could determine my value, reducing me to assets to be managed, possessions to be distributed, inconvenient presence to be institutionalized. In trying to erase me, he inadvertently forced me to see myself more clearly than ever before, not as mother only, not as keeper of family heirlooms for future generations, not as support system for his ambitions, but as a complete person with intrinsic value and continued purpose. I don't know if reconciliation will ever be possible between us. That chapter remains unwritten, its potential storylines neither forced nor foreclosed. What I do know with absolute certainty is that my story continues, not as epilogue or afterthought, but as ongoing narrative with meaningful chapters still unfolding. The inheritance that mattered most wasn't contained in jewelry boxes or bank accounts. It was the strength developed through decades of overcoming obstacles, the wisdom acquired through both joy and sorrow, the capacity to begin again even when the path forward looks nothing like the road behind. That inheritance remains securely mine, not taken, not diminished, not divided among others before its time. Mine to live, mine to share on my own terms, mine to pass along through actions and influence rather than objects alone. The grandfather clock in my hallway still keeps perfect time, marking hours of a life reclaimed rather than merely endured. Spring becomes summer, becomes autumn, becomes winter, the cycle continuing as it always has. I move through these seasons differently now, more consciously present, more honestly myself, more aware of both vulnerability and strength. The painful awakening of betrayal has given way to something unexpected, freedom to be exactly who I am, without apology or artifice, for however many seasons remain. I closed the journal, listening to the comforting sounds of my home at night, the refrigerator's gentle hum, a distant train whistle, the grandfather clock preparing to strike 10. Not the future I'd once imagined, but increasingly, beautifully mine.